Leonard, why don't you start off by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got interested in the world of EMS and geopathic stress?
Okay. Well, it started out about 5 or 6 years ago. I got interested specifically in EMFs and whether or not mobile phones caused cancer, because there was some debate on that, and some reporting said it did, and some other reports said it didn't. So when I investigated it, I found that it definitely did, and there were sort of massive cover-up. So that sort of got me interested, and I started looking more deeply into it. And then I thought, well, what can I do about this? And it seemed to me the only thing I could do really was to help people try and mitigate the effects of EMFs. So I retired, which was 5 years ago. I studied EMFs first in the UK and then in Austria, and then started doing surveys and shielding houses and helping people to reduce the impacts on their lives. So
yeah, what was going on with the cover-ups? What do you mean by that? Were they just not publishing the studies, or were they?
They're not publishing them, but all sorts of things. Studies were skewed, where universities got results which showed negative effects of mobile phones. Funding was withdrawn. All sorts of things. There's been books written about this. It's absolutely terrible. So yeah, loads of stuff.
And what conclusion did you come to? Just looking at both sides, what are your thoughts? Do you think that they are linked to cancer, and if so, any particular type?
Oh, no doubt. Well, EMFs not only linked to cancer, they're linked to a whole host of what Sam Milham calls the modern diseases of civilization. So cancers, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, all of these things, even depression, there's a link with EMFs, and the mechanisms whereby EMFs help on these diseases is well documented through research.
And with some of these mobile phones, is it just the EMFs that we should be concerned about, or are there other things with some of these newer smartphones that are problematic, or is the EMF the main concern?
From my perspective, what I deal with is EMFs, the fields from them. I think with the smartphones, there are all sorts of other issues with addiction and children just looking at their phones the whole time and things like that, not interacting. But the thing that I deal with is just the EMF side of it.
So at a very basic introductory level, what exactly is EMF? We're going to be mentioning that term throughout the podcast. So I want people to know exactly what it is and why is it a concern to human health. Okay,
so EMF stands for electromagnetic field, and basically there are two types, well there are more, but two main types of EMF. So you've got high frequency, which travels through the air, and that comes from mobile phones, mobile phone towers, microwaves, baby monitors, and so on. And then there's low frequency, which is EMS from the wiring and the electrical wiring. So that's from pylons, substations, and then wiring in your house. Now, there's been a lot of research on both types to show that they are associated with, well, the diseases I mentioned previously. So, for example, low frequency, it was shown back in about 1979 that children who lived with a field of 4 milligauss, which is a measure of magnetic field, 4 milligauss or more, had twice the chance of getting leukemia as children who didn't. So that was the start. That's where all this started from. And there's many other studies to illustrate the impact of EMFs.
Yeah, and is it understood like exactly how they affect us on a cellular level? Is it because we are just moving atoms and energy and this electricity? I don't know the scientific terms, but do they know?
Well, yes. Dr. Martin Paul has done a lot of research on this, and it's something called voltage-gated calcium channels. So what EMFs do is they open these channels, and that means calcium floods into the cell, and then that causes all sorts of things to happen within the cell, and that's why you've got so many cases of autism, early onset Alzheimer's, and so on, because it affects the neural cells, the nerve cells, particularly. And then EMF, if you take cells and subject them to EMFs, they produce heat shock proteins. So what that means is the cells themselves are telling us, if you like, that they're being subjected to and something that's damaging to them, because they produce heat shock proteins in the presence of poisons and antibiotics and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think everyone is negatively affected or are displaying symptoms of EMF sensitivity, or would you say there's a particular subset, maybe the sensitive individuals with some of those conditions, who are most at risk?
I think that it probably is affecting everyone, and I think that people have different ability to cope with it just based on their genetics or whatever. Because I mean, there's some people who are, massively affected, and I've been to people who live in their sheds, for example, because they can't cope with the EMFs in the home. So there's great variability, but what you must realise is that it can be a cumulative effect. So you can be using a mobile phone and be fine with it, and then all of a sudden you can have it can have an effect on you, and you become electrosensitive. Yeah. And also the other thing to remember is that there's a 20 to 40 year latency period for cancers to appear following radiation exposure. So this is a sort of awful thing, really, if you think about that, with children using these mobile phones. We don't know what we're storing up for ourselves in the future.
Exactly, and the changes that have been made in the last few decades with technology alone, and smartphones and Apple and all of these like Alexa devices. There's a whole nother controversy with whether they're stealing our data and listening into us into our conversations and things, but that's a whole nother.
Well, that's right.
Nother subject.
I think that's been demonstrated that is happening, but yes, absolutely, that is another
crazy stuff.
Issue.
And
yes.
I've heard before that EMF is a natural thing. Sunlight is a natural form of EMF. I don't know if that's true, but what's the difference between electromagnetic fields from things like sunlight, if that's a factor, or even microwaves? We sometimes hear that they're absolutely fine or they're harmful to our health. How does technology differ?
The big difference is that man-made EMFs are pulsing. So so in the wiring, it's at 50 cycles a second, 50 hertz. But with the high frequency, you're in the gigahertz range, and it pulses millions of times a second, and it's the pulsing that does the damage. So whereas natural EMFs are DC, just flow in one direction.
Okay, so it's just magnified levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the amount of EMFs that we're exposed to now is a quintillion times bigger than what we evolved with, and a quintillion is one with 18 zeros after it. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, I can't even begin to think of how big that is.
No, you can't. No, that's right. No,
my tiny mind can't even comprehend that. No. And what would be your top tips for reducing EMF exposure? So we can't completely avoid them in the modern world, because if you in your house try to limit it, probably your next door neighbour has Wi-Fi on all day, all night. And when you go out in shopping centres and things, there's just no avoiding it. But what are some of your tips for reducing exposure?
The main one would be to reduce, or as far as possible, the use of mobile phone, and certainly never hold it close to your head. And if you can, switch it off, because when it's on, it's always looking for the base station. So switch it off as much as possible, or put it on aeroplane mode. So that's number one. Number two would be never to take mobile phone into your bedroom, never have it on at night. You want to sleep. The ideal is to sleep shielded. So if you turn off your router at night, if you've got a DECT phone, which is one of these handheld ones with a base station that you walk around with, either get a gigaset one which you can switch off, or get an old-fashioned corded phone, because these DECT phones are emitting 24 hours a day, emitting all the time. To go further, you could hardwire a router and then switch off the Wi-Fi function. Personally, I would recommend not using a microwave oven. Baby monitors are awful, and on my website there is one that you can get that doesn't emit radiation, but on the whole they emit a lot of radiation, and that's criminal, really. So that's what you can do internally. And then to go on from that, if people aren't sleeping or got brain fog or whatever, they may want to consider shielding the bedroom. And that's what I do when I do a survey, and then look at how to do that. And there are various ways of doing that. So one, you can just put a canopy over the bed, and then that shields you from the EMFs while you're asleep, because it's the main thing seems to be to sleep shielded, and then you can recover overnight, and your body recovers and rejuvenates.
Yeah, because that's the time where we should be healing. And some people say if you're going to get an air filter, have that in the bedroom, because that's where you spend a big portion of your day, or in your office, really focusing on those areas, because you don't want to be exposed to some of these things when your body's trying to heal and repair. And what about smart meters? So across the UK, I know that they're trying to get them in every single household. Luckily, I haven't got one installed yet, but they're really trying to push this. The benefits, I'm not sure what they're doing that for. Is it to save, trying to monitor electricity output a bit more? But I've heard that they're really harmful to health because of the high EMF output. Is that something that you're concerned about?
Well, that you're absolutely right. They are harmful to health, because they put out a field across the sort of neighbourhood, because they sort of talk to each other. So my advice on those would be to absolutely avoid it if you can. If you can't, then again, you can shield. There are certain ways of shielding them. But yeah, try and avoid at all costs, really. But as you say, if your neighbours have got them, that's when you start to look at shielding your bedroom, because you know that's the only way probably to stop the EMFs coming through.
Yeah, and I've heard before with some of the shielding products, so like the magnets that you can get for your phone, or the tents around your bed, some of them, when you try to shield them, it actually makes the EMF output stronger in some ways. So it kind of like reflects it, or it causes your phone to produce more EMF to try and get a signal. Is that correct?
Yeah, okay. When you shield, if you put a canopy over the bed, then rules are never take your mobile phone into the canopy, never take your computer in there. It becomes a sanctuary. The same with your bedroom. If you shield your bedroom, it's the same thing. Don't take your mobile phone in there, because if you do, you're absolutely right, it can bounce around a little bit. Signals can bounce around. You have to be careful when you're shielding. So I've gone to houses where people have just shielded one wall. That can make it worse, because then signals can come in through the window and bounce back. So you have to take into account a number of things, and that's why I really do the survey and tend to shield bedroom, the walls, ceiling, and the floor. That's what I tend to do.
Yeah.
So creating a Faraday cage, and then having curtain linings to stop the EMF coming through the curtains.
Do you
Depends
have any...
a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah.
It just depends a little bit on the levels of radiation that you're getting. But certainly in London or in towns generally, you need to shield.
Yeah, I can imagine it's like 10 times worse in cities. So that's a positive for me. I'm not living somewhere like that. What about crystals? So in like the natural medicine world, people use crystals on their desk whilst they're working to try and block EMF. So they have crystals on the the back of the smartphone case? Is that just a waste of time?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. In my experience, I haven't necessarily come across crystals that would work. I think they probably do help, but I think the problem is that EMFs are getting so much more prevalent now that whether or not, I mean, I would never recommend a client just getting a crystal. If the client's got one, they're fine, but I would never recommend it as a means to alleviate EMF. But it may help. I don't know.
Yeah, and for chronically sick people, they have a lot of issues with infections, whether that's viral infections or Lyme or heavy metals and these types of things. And I tend to see that they are quite EMF sensitive. Is there any connection with some of these things like mold, heavy metals? Do EMFs in some way make them worse?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. Mold grows, I think it's 600 times more in the presence of EMFs than when they're not there. And EMF, if you've got heavy metals in your body, EMFs sort of activate them. So they and I think help them get through the blood-brain barrier. So there is a sort of association. So with people who are chronically sick like that, the ideal, in my view, is to shield the bedroom so that they can sleep shielded, but then do other things like that you do, like clearing heavy metals and whatever, and trying to get rid of mold and so on.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of work, and people are so fixated on things like their diet and taking supplements, but they fail to address some huge factors like the EMFs. So that's why partly why I wanted to record this episode. And I think the information is getting out there a little bit more, but I think more people need to be aware of the negative effects. Because for some people, smartphones and the internet is like the best thing ever to be created, but people like you and I'm starting to be aware that maybe it's not the best thing. And having, for me, an online business, I'm like, oh, it's like kind of good because I can work from home and work with people across the world, but then I'm constantly concerned about the EMF exposure, so I try to do everything else that I can to offset that a little bit, but I know that there's a limit to that.
Yeah, well, there are things that you can do. So like hardwiring your computer, you're having a headset which is with an air tube headset, you've probably got that, and things like that you can do to mitigate those sort of things.
Yeah, and I'm avoiding the AirPods, the wireless headphones. Yes. I'm guessing that's a similar
yes, that's right.
way that they work. Yeah.
That's just putting the EMF straight into your ear. Yeah.
Ooh.
Straight.
Inches from your brain. Not good.
Yes. No.
What about 5G? So I don't know.
Right. Okay.
If it's been released in the UK, so maybe you can update me on like what the whole process is with 5G. Again, people are claiming it's going to be amazing. It'll speed up internet times and all of that, but there's a lot of people who are really seriously concerned, and there's protests and summits all about 5G. So why don't you tell us a bit about what it is and why this is like probably one step too far?
So 5G is possibly the sort of worst thing that's happening to humanity, because the frequencies they're going to use are going way up. So at the moment it only uses up to 6 or 10 gigahertz, but I think they're going to release the 28 gigahertz bands, and then they're looking at 60, 90. Now, when you bear in mind that at 95 gigahertz, the Americans have a weapon which is called the active denial weapon, that they can, if they've got a crowd of people, to disperse a crowd, they will direct this weapon on the ringleader, and then he doesn't see anything, but it feels like his skin's on fire, so he has to move out of the way. So that's 90 gigahertz. That is what they're talking about using 5G. Obviously at lesser power density, but it's absolutely crazy. In the last 10 years, the insect population has diminished by 80%. I mean, that's without 5G. Your effects on birds, I mean, the house sparrow, which used to be everywhere, is now on the red list. It's endangered. I mean, these sort of things are incredible. rates of autism in 1972, 1 or 2 children were born autistic. Now the level is 1 in 80. It was 1 or 2 per 10,000. Sorry, 1 in 2 per 10,000. Now it's 1 in 80. It's doubling every year. It reported in the papers a while ago that anyone born after 1960 has or 1 in 2 people born after 1960 can expect to get cancer in their lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things, there's no getting slightly off the track here, but there's no hope for the NHS to cope with all of these sort of things. No wonder that it's got problems. But 5G is just going to make all of this worse, because they're launching, well, as you know, they're launching satellites into space. They've already launched quite a lot. And then when they come live, it's going to be awful. It went live in Switzerland, and they had a lot of people protesting because of illnesses. They got tinnitus and other illnesses that have happened. It went live in Gateshead, and children there got nosebleeds and other things. There was a chap called Mark Steele who sort of exposed all of this, and the council took him to court and tried to imprison him. Luckily, they didn't. He was just telling the truth. And lampposts, some of the lampposts are 5G enabled already, so that it's all ready to sort of roll out. Now, the thing is with 5G, the higher frequency wavelengths, they don't travel so well through buildings and through trees and things like that. So they have to have a lot more antennas, which is why they're putting them on lampposts and everywhere like that. And I think the power is turned up. So you get it's a whole new wave of exposure, which will be harmful. There's no doubt about that. Now, I have a view of this, which is my own personal view, that it could actually be a good thing. Now, this sounds very counterintuitive, but I think what could happen is that things will get so bad, mankind will go to the sort of edge of the cliff, as it were, and then people will suddenly say, hold on, I don't want to live like this. When enough people say that, could start getting a change in the world. It's like if enough people said, don't want to have any children starving in the world, we, humanity, could change that overnight. Is the capability, but there's not the will there. So if 5G becomes the thing that changes that, and say, well, we want to change the way we live, then it ironically could be a good thing. So I'm optimistic. And there was a summit, the 5G Crisis Summit, hosted by Josh Del Sol, where he had a load of really qualified speakers about 5G. And it was surprising how many of them also had a positive outlook for this sort of reason.
Yeah, that's a good perception on things. At least to try and make us feel a bit calmer about the whole thing. But is there anything that, yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's very important to feel, not to feel worried about it, because that puts you into fear, and then that just makes the thing worse. I mean, what's going to happen will happen. But if you're calm and get your own sort of strength and do something about it, that's the point. You can do something about it. I mean, we could change 5G if everyone stopped using their mobile phone. I know they won't. If everyone stopped using their mobile phone, 5G wouldn't happen, because it's that mobile phones are what's funding it. So we have the power, actually. People don't realize that. So yeah, I think, yes, I think don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, the stress combined with EMF will not be a good combination. Let's at least try to control one of those things.
Yes, feel empowered. Do something about it. I mean, like having a survey, like shielding, like turning off your router at night. Do things.
Are there any petitions or anything that are online to try and stop it in the UK, or is it all ready to go ahead?
Oh, right, okay. There definitely are petitions. And then on the 25th of January, there's Global Protest Day, 5G Global Protest Day. And a chap called Arthur Furstenberg has launched a global appeal to stop 5G, which is, and is on my website, actually, if people wanted to to go and sign that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll link to all of those things or anything that you mentioned as well in the show notes for people to refer back to as well. But for you personally, do you think with these chronic lifestyle-driven diseases these days, like you've mentioned, diabetes and cancers and Alzheimer's, how much of that do you think is due to EMFs and some of these other things that we've been talking about, or diet and exercise? And
I think that it's probably everything, but I think that EMFs play a very significant role. I mean, obviously, diet and your lifestyle will help, but yeah, I think EMFs just are very, very important in it.
Do you have any like success stories of removing someone from an EMF, a high EMF environment, or helping them shield, and they've improved any certain symptoms?
Yes. I mean, I've had quite a few. I'm just trying to think of a good one to tell you. This is slightly different, but there's one thing that I do when I do a survey, and I recommend shielding the bedroom. I also recommend, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes putting in a device called a memon. And what a memon does is it will counteract geopathic stress. I know we're going to talk about that later on, but also it helps counterbalance the damaging effects of EMFs within the home. Now, one of my clients, I put one of those in. They're going to shield the bedroom, but they hadn't yet. And he wrote to me and told me the effects that it had on his wife. So can I just read that out?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he said, so in the past 10 days, so this is 10 days after putting it in, Sue says I'm sleeping better. She is sleeping better and deeper. Sue no longer feels like she has a major hangover every morning, sometimes quite lively in the mornings compared to before. And in the past few days, there's been no headache on waking up. Only once has her eye drooped, and that was in the local Boots in town. So her eye was sort of drooping a bit, but that stopped. She has had the odd headache, but no debilitating ones like previously. Sue seems to have more energy, looks a better colour. She has not felt the strange sensation in the shower or by the bathroom sink these days. No longer apprehensive about going upstairs to the bathroom, having a shower, or going to the desk. Everything seems to have a feeling of being better in the house. The cold, edgy atmosphere seems to be changing. Looks like things are improving quite drastically at the moment. Hopefully it will continue.
Amazing.
So that was, so that's from the memon, and then they're probably going to shield the bedroom later on. But so that's one. And then often the most common effect that I have when I shield the bedroom is that people sleep better. They say, oh, my sleep's improved. And even when you put up a canopy, and if you stand outside the canopy and just very quiet and then go in and lay down, it feels peaceful, it feels different. And that's the same in a shielded bedroom. So,
Yeah, so what exactly is the memon? Is it something that people can just buy online, or do you need to be trained to use something like that?
I think you can buy it online, but it's something that you just literally plug in. You plug into the wall and it piggybacks on the electrical circuit. And the inventor found a way of using quartz crystals, which have a vibration, and they sort of fusing them, I think, with silicon, and they give out a vibration that is 180 degrees out of phase with the damaging aspect of an EMF. So it sort of counterbalances by sort of noise reduction headphones. It counterbalances the damaging aspect of EMF. So the whole beauty of memon is it's creating a natural environment. It's not putting anything into the environment. It's just trying to get it back to nature. So there are devices that put sort of frequencies into the room, and I'm not a fan of those because I think what they're doing is just masking the EMF so that the EMF's still there. Well, with the memon it's still there, but the damaging aspect has been, taken away. Okay. So And there's books written about memon. I mean, there's a book called The Memon Revolution, which goes through it. Very, very powerful.
And how much approximately can this range from? Like what prices?
Right. So for a flat, 770 odd pounds, and then for a house, 1,300 or something, and then bigger houses more.
Mm-hmm. And would this be something that you'd need to change every year or so, or is it once you bought it, it's
it
good?
lasts. Well, so far they've lasted for 20 years. There's no moving parts in it. I think it just keeps going ad infinitum, sort of thing.
Would you rather someone have the memon or like a shield or canopy around the bed? Which would you say would be the? I know the ideally is probably both, but
yeah, absolutely. Very difficult. I think it would depend on the circumstance. So if someone, usually I would probably do the shielding first, and then say get the memon later, so that they're sleeping shielded. There may be times when I've had a couple of clients who have wanted to do the memon first, and so they've done it, and then they're going to shield later on. Yeah, I think I would go for the shielding as the first sort of priority.
Yeah, I know that was a difficult question for you, but it's like choosing your favorite child.
I'm asked that. I don't have one.
So now let's talk a bit about geopathic stress. What exactly is that? What do you mean by that?
Okay, so geopathic stress is where there's an excess of earth energy, if you like. So where you've got a water vein, you've got different minerals in the water that sort of go together, and the water's under pressure, and then that releases a very low amount of ions from, and that rises up through the atmosphere. Now, farmers in Australia, I think, still dowse for water, and in this country we used to dowse for water, and it's been dowsing is ancient. I think the Egyptians used to dowse. So it's something that's we tend to think of as abnormal, but it's not really. So what a chap called Baron von Pohl found in 1930 in Bavaria was that there was a town called Bilsbiberg where there were a lot of people who had cancer. He went to the town and said he'd predict where the people who had cancer were living. And he went and dowsed, marked on a map where all the water veins in the town were. Then the map was given to the chief medical officer, and the medical officer marked on there where houses were where people had died of cancer. And if the house was half over a water vein and half not, then they went and checked which half of the house was over the water vein. And what they found, everyone who died of cancer had been sleeping over a water vein. So this was in 1930. Now, since then, the experiment was repeated in another town, and in Germany and in Austria, the oncologists are very much more aware of this. And one indeed said cancer is a disease of place, i.e., sleeping over. So when I do a survey, and if I dowse for water veins around the bed, and then I dowse for what's called Hartmann lines and Curry lines. And these are magnetic lines that span the globe, because the Earth has a molten iron core spinning on its axis, creates these magnetic lines that were discovered in the 60s. Where they cross, that can be a hot spot. And again, cancer can develop in a hot spot. So it doesn't mean to say if you're sleeping over water vein, you will get cancer, but it means if you're going to get cancer, it tends to develop over a place of geopathic stress. So what I like to do is if I find geopathic stress, is to suggest ways to get rid of it. I think that's quite important. And memon that we mentioned is possibly the best. There are one or two others, but memon's the main one that I use now.
Okay, so it does multiple different things. So it's like a two-in-one, the EMFs and the geopathic stress.
It's it things that are harmful EMFs, harmful frequencies, it sort of neutralizes. So it works against 5G. It wasn't developed for 5G, but it works for 5G because that's a harmful frequency. So it's putting it back to nature.
Yeah. And if people are developing cancer in higher amounts depending on where they live, why would the Earth be developed that way? Like probably 10,000 years ago, would it have still been the same? People who lived in certain
Okay.
areas.
Okay. Well, I think what's happened, uh, I think a number of things. First of all, going way back, people wouldn't have slept in the same place. You tended to travel around. So, like modern day gypsies, they travel around. So they're not sleeping for one long period of time over geopathic stress. I also think that people were far more aware of this, so that there's farmers used to put sheep in a field and see where they went to sleep, and then they would either build the house there or not build it there. I can't remember which way around it was, but so we were a lot more aware of it. And even there's a house big house in Ireland, a sort of mansion type thing, built in the 1800s, I think. And there's a geopathic stress line going straight towards it, and then it disappears. When it gets to the house, it disappears. And I think that going way back, people knew how to deal with the geopathic stress and how to mitigate it. Now we don't think about it. We're building. So that's one point. But the other point is our immune systems are all shot now because of the EMF that we're subjected to. So I think we're a lot more sensitive to these things. So whereas in the past, it might be that sleeping on a apartment line crossing wouldn't cause a problem, now because our immune systems are not functioning as they should, it tends to cause a problem, or it can do.
And I'd never heard of this before until learning about your work, so I doubt that other people have heard about this as well. And I've correlated certain locations with lesser health, more health problems, but that would be more like economical and what they have access to, or like vitamin D exposure, but not anything like this. Is this something that people can visually see? So like the water lines, would it just mean like you live near a lake or something, or is that just
no, because I mean the water vein, every tree, or pretty much every tree, has its roots will go to a water vein because it's transpiring water all the time.
Right.
So they're quite common. But no, you can't see it. The only way there's something called a scintillation counter, which will measure it, but I think they're very expensive, and I haven't got one. So I dowse for it. On my website, there's a YouTube video with a chap called Brendan Murphy, who is a dowser in Ireland, and he talks about geopathic stress. It's worth watching. If someone's interested in geopathic stress, definitely worth watching that.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just something like when you go to buy a house, there's certain things to avoid or certain things to look for. You can't really do that.
No, I would. No. But again, I wouldn't worry, because if you've got, it's so easy to resolve. You know, so if you're buying a house, the big thing to look out for is magnetic fields. If there are magnetic fields from power lines or underground cables or something like that, you can't shield against those. So then, if it was me, I wouldn't buy the house. But if there's geopathic stress, you put a memon in and you resolve it.
Okay. And have you got any examples of changing around the bedroom, or someone even moving house in an extreme case where their health has improved?
Well, I've had, there was one lady that I did the survey for, and when I surveyed it, she said there was cancer in the house, but I didn't know who had, any more. So anyway, I found that there was a crossing over on her bed where she slept, and when she saw it, she said, "Oh my goodness me, that's exactly where I've got cancer." And so we shielded her room and resolved the geopathic stress. And as far as I know, she's doing quite well.
Amazing.
So
it's crazy to think. And do you know if she'd done any other things?
With lifestyle? I mean, she was doing, she's doing other. So
okay.
I can't just say it was that, but yeah, I think that was an important aspect, because we shielded for EMFs as well. So we did geopathic stress and EMFs.
Yeah. And what about grounding and earthing? So again, this is more of like a old school naturopathic recommendation. It's becoming more common to do and hear about again. Does this come into EMFs or geopathic stress in any way?
Right. So earthing, I think, standing on the earth with bare feet, is that?
Yeah.
Is that what? Yeah. So I think that is very, very useful. There's a chap called Jack Kruse, who's an American neurosurgeon, who is very big into this, and he's big into natural sunlight and being out in the sun at sunrise and then being exposed to the sun during the day. And he advocates go out and stand on the earth in your bare feet for a period of 5-10 minutes or whatever at sunrise. And I would go along with that. I mean, I think that's absolutely. So yes, earthing like that. Now, grounding mats I'm not a fan of. So these are or grounding sheets that you put on the bed and then connect to the electrical earth. The reason I'm not a fan of those is because EMFs will, if they're coming from underneath, they'll hit the grounding sheet and go to earth. So that's fine. But if they're coming from the walls, they'll come through you to the grounding sheet. So they could, long term, in my view, they can be not helpful. So I don't recommend those grounding sheets, but earthing, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I'm actually interviewing someone tomorrow on circadian rhythm, and he talks about light and dark, and he's a founder of a blue blocking glasses company. I don't know if you've heard of Blue Blocks in Australia.
No. What's his name?
Andy Mant.
I don't know him. No, but blue blocking glasses, absolutely. Now, I wanted to find a supplier in the UK, but
they ship worldwide. Yeah,
okay,
and they're the only brand that have been like scientifically studied, and they're made in an optics lab, whereas other ones are just made in a factory. So they are a little bit pricey. Mine were like £60 or something. And there's some on Amazon for like £10 that you can get, but they really work.
Right.
The first week, I was like, my sleep, I just felt like I was
really
in a coma. Yeah, my sleep was that good.
Right. Okay. So are you going to?
Yeah, I'll send you I'll send you the link to the website and also
Thank
the
you.
interview when that goes live as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we're going to be talking about how it connects to hormonal health. I think it would have been aired before your episode, but I'll send you the link as well, definitely.
Yeah. No, I'm totally a fan of that, and that's exactly what Jack Kruse is very big into. So I think that's another part of where you shield the bedroom, and then I've had 2 clients of mine have healed themselves from electrohypersensitivity by, one of them canopy over the bed, but also following this Jack Kruse thing where the light, and they've got blue blocker glasses and all of that, and the other one similar.
Yeah, it really does work.
Yes, absolutely.
And then just to finish up with a few questions about you personally. So what is something that you do every day to support your health? So obviously I'm guessing your house is like shielded everywhere and all of that, but is there anything else that you do every day?
I think yes, I think probably I sort of every morning I sort of meditate for 15-20 minutes, and I think that's probably quite important.
Yeah. And do you have like an app, or do you just sit there and do it on your own?
Oh no,
without the smartphone. That's a silly question. You do it the old-fashioned way.
Yes.
I sadly use an app, but I'll try.
I'll try
and avoid that from now.
I don't know. Yeah.
The second question is, what's one product that you can't live without? So I'm guessing the memon and a shield, but is there anything else? It could be health related, non-health related.
Oh well, funnily and yes, glasses. So I've got pinhole. I use pinhole glasses. Do you know those? Have you come across those? I'll show you.
I'm intrigued.
So there you go. So now with those, they've got pinholes in. So I can read those on. So because if you put glasses on, your eyes tend to weaken. So I've heard. Well, I've experienced it. So with those, it tends to strengthen the eyes. So yeah, there's another podcast for you, maybe.
Yeah.
Not from me, but from pinhole glasses.
Interesting. Never heard of that one either.
Right. Okay.
And you've given us a few resources as we've gone along in the episode. But is there one entry-level book or resource that you'd want to recommend on the subject of EMFs to share with the listeners?
Yes, there's two. I've got two books.
Yep.
So this one, you can see that if you want to, the tinfoil guide to EMFs.
Yeah, I've heard of that one before.
That is a very, very good book, and your background to EMFs, and it's quite readable. Now, the very best book that you could ever get on EMFs is The Invisible Rainbow, at Arthur Furstenberg. That's quite expensive, and it costs about 25 quid just to get it delivered. But he goes through the whole background of electricity in that, and you wouldn't believe it. I mean, there's so much in there that I learned, and I've been studying this stuff for years. That is absolutely brilliant book if someone's interested to learn the background to it.
Yeah, my dad's into electronics, and he has an electrical wholesale business, so I might gift it to him and then secretly read it myself.
Well, absolutely, yes, absolutely worthwhile. Yes, brilliant. You'll love it. You'll love it.
Great. And last question is, Leonard, where can people find more about you online? How can they get in touch if they're interested in one of the surveys? And also, if they live internationally, are there any other people that you recommend, maybe in the US, or resources online that they can search on?
Yeah, okay. So if they want to get hold of me, my website is www.youremfguide.com. That's all one word. So that's me, and I do surveys in the UK, and internationally, there's someone called Brian Hoyer in the States. Now, he trained with Geobiologist like I did, and then he's gone on and done his own thing, a bit like I have. So I'm very, aligned to him. So in the States, I'd recommend him. Elsewhere, I don't really know. I mean, I'm going to Denmark soon, probably to do some surveys there, and a friend of mine in France may want me to go over to do a survey there. So, but I can't really recommend.
That's fine. I'm sure they can find something on Google and research the person to see where they've trained, what it is that they do, and it may be pretty similar. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today, and I've learned a lot personally. And it's something in my mind that I want to pay more attention to. I know it's a little bit difficult in the modern world, but I'm going to do my best, and I hope this information doesn't scare people off. I know that we wanted to make it an empowering episode, educational, and just make people more aware. So I think we've managed to do that. So thank you so much for your time, Leonard.
Okay, you're very welcome. That's fine. Thank you.